Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off. And for the month of August of 1993, we are welcoming a new magazine to the battle. It's Amiga Computing. And joining it today are Amiga Action and the One For Amiga. Fight! Now let's start off with the newbie, Amiga Computing. A magazine that had been around for quite some time, but tended to lean away from games. But this disc managed to fit 3 PD games on it, as well as a professional demo. And it boots into this interesting workbench, with an extra shell window along the bottom and a reversed cursor, which really is throwing me. But seeing we're here, we can check out the workbench game Mini Isola. This is a mostly simple looking and playing game. And it's you versus the computer. And you have to take 2 actions. The first is to move your icon, which can be moved a single square away in any direction. And then the other is to place a barrier, which will stop movement. The goal is to get the other player into a position where they can't take a move, with them obviously trying to do the same to you. And the computer is very good at it. Now I have the feeling we've covered a similar game to this before, and I just can't remember whether or not it was another PD title or if it was on PC, but I'm sure one of you lot watching right now can let me know in the comments. This is a fun enough version, as you can change the size of the grid, but what shocked me a little bit was that there was no 2-player option, as usually it's 2 players and no computer. The second game is Poing, which I figured would be a Pong clone, but no, it turns out it's actually a take on Breakout, but played sideways. Now I'm sure this must be based on an arcade or an 8-bit game, but I don't recall seeing this before. And I know there are just a few of you just ready to tell me what it is in the comments, so I'm looking forward to those. I actually really am. I do love learning about these games that I play. There are a few unique, at least to me, hooks in this game. The first is that it will randomly select the levels that you play. I don't think the levels are completely randomly generated, as I've seen some of them have some set designs, but the order you get them in is definitely random. And unlike most Crypt and Egg style games, the goal isn't to clear all the bricks, which is handy as some of the levels the bricks will respawn. Instead, you need to hit the back of the board, and this will start to break it. And after a number of hits, I think about 10, it will open up and allow the ball to travel through to the next level, where you get to do it all over again. But if the ball falls out to the left hand side of the playing field, it will return to the previous level, where it will now be monochrome and the ball will move extremely quickly. But if you manage to hit it and get it back through, then you can continue, which is a really cool thing. Now there does seem to be a few extras that you can get along the way, like extra balls or bonus multipliers. Not that you'll be able to see most of those from my terrible gameplay. I'm really not that great at this type of game. But I did have a lot of fun with it, and I do think it is quite cool. As this was more of a professional magazine, they had to have a real program, and in this instance it's a cut down version of Cinemorph, which we can tell because it's the Junior Edition. Now we've seen PD morphing software before, but this is from the mighty GVP, the people behind the HD8 Plus that we've seen a few times. The basics of it are the same. You can load 1 or 2 pictures that you want to morph between, and then you can use the grid of points to then set the features of each image. And once you've done that, you can then just kick off the render or check out individual frames. Now this is a program that will benefit from a lot of RAM and CPU power, which is where running it on the 1200 is quite good. But you could have used a 500 plus if you really wanted to, it just would have been a bit more limited and a lot slower. Now this does seem to have a lot of options, including working with coloured images, which that PD one we looked at before couldn't. But at the end it will still generate a deluxe paint animation file so it can be played quite easily after being generated. The final PD game of the magazine is Crazy Sue Goes On. And does this start off with a belter of a music track or what? The music then continues in-game and it looks quite nice as well, better than some commercial games that we've seen in the past. But I will say that outside of the presentation, this game needs work. As the controls, they are odd and they are a little bit broken. As the basic movement is mostly fine, but when you have to jump, things don't work quite as you might expect. Like doing a moving jump moves you just a short distance, but doing a standing jump makes you go much further, which feels like the opposite of almost every other game that I've played, and it will take a bit of unlearning to get used to it. There also isn't much in the way of fine-grained movement. Just tapping a direction is quite the step, and it can be enough to fall off a ledge and into spikes, which happen to me way too often. And also happens in air, so it's really difficult to try and land on those platforms that you need to. But one neat thing with the jumping is that you can actually bounce off the side of walls. Well, I say neat, more often than not it'll be annoying, but it is cool that they added it. You will need to collect books, as these will give you abilities, the core of which is to open up doors, as you need to visit all of them, which I didn't get anywhere near close to doing. Because, yep, those controls kept messing with me. Now this really is an interesting PD game, and it's got a lot going on for it. Even if the controls will leave you baffled and slightly annoyed. Let's move on to the next magazine, which is the One For Amiga, that provided 2 discs and a bit of a surprise, as that first disc has a full game on it, and the second has some PD as well as a demo. So let's get started! The full game is Trex Warrior 22nd Century Gladiator, that according to the magazine was never published in the UK. So the One decided it was going to take up the mantle. And the game itself was a few years old by this point, but it's still a lovely looking full 3D title, and it runs really smoothly on an A1200. The game itself is a bit of an arena shooter, and you have a day to take down as many drones as you can, as they'll just keep spawning in. And you have to use your glider to take them down, which is all controlled via the mouse, so holding down the right mouse button and pushing forward or back will set the speed that you move at. And the aiming will be done by moving the mouse left and right, and then you can shoot with the left mouse button. You can even gain some air by driving over the jump pad, which is very useful for taking out those flying enemies. I also found it's better to drive backwards to try and take those things down, as they keep trying to get behind you. And for the most part, this is the main game loop. You can spend some money between the days to get upgrades, but mostly it's about taking down those drones much quicker. It all looks very nice and it's fun enough, I guess, but at the same time, I don't really feel there's much here, so I can see why it might not have been published in the UK. Now it's possible that I've just not gotten far enough into the game to really see it open up, which is the limitation of this video format, as it's meant to be quickly checking out the discs, as I would have done back in the day, and then I would return to them later on to really dig into some of the more detailed games. And this might have been one of them that I would have put in more time. Next up is the world's #1 platforming hero that is egg-shaped and has big hands. That's right, it's Giddy. What were you expecting, someone else? This is Wibble World Giddy, and yes, it is a PD version of Dizzy. Except this controls better. Movement and jumping is fine, with little in the way of rolling momentum of said other egg. And the collecting of stuff is just you walking over it, as you have an unlimited inventory. Oh, lovely. To use any item, you hold down on the joystick and then press fire. You can then cycle left and right, and then hit fire to use it, which will then make you jump as well, so you'll have to time that with anything that's flying around, as you might hit it and lose some health. And yes, we have health, as well as lives. And you will just lose some of that health because some of those baddies are almost impossible to avoid. Although thankfully there are strategically placed beats that will give you more health. This looks very nice, and it also has some lovely music, which by all accounts was borrowed from a professional game. But I have to say it fits in nicely here. And as this is the early 90s, the Amiga Atari wars were still ongoing, but as an olive branch, we have to collect an Atari ST from a bin and give it to a raving Atari user, but then they only give us a sweaty sock in return. I don't think that exchange was quite equal. This is another PD game that could have been a budget release, and I think could have done quite well. Let's go on to the single demo, which was for Aisha 2. An RPG dungeon crawler. Something that I probably would have been all over back then, but I find it much harder to get into them these days. And the demo seems to be for just the dungeon crawling side of the game, and it just drops you right in. Thankfully, these tend to control just the same. So you can attack with these buttons here, though I'm not sure if each button is for a different character or just for different weapon classes on the current one. But after a quick fight, we get to look at the characters, and it's all feeling very standard for this genre. As we can see what they're holding, and then we can move things around, and yes, it seems that the buttons that I was pressing earlier were for each hero, so you didn't have to keep switching between them, which makes things a lot easier than some of the games that I've played. Now overall, the basic engine looks good. It has lots of open areas and interesting corridors and props in the world. But I'm not that great at this type of game, so this makes my playthrough very short, and I start losing my heroes very quickly. Now this is something that I would have put far more time into back in the day, as there's a lot to get into here, and a whole world to try and explore. Well, a cut down world anyway for the demo. Would I have bought the full game? Possibly not, but would I have had fun in the demo? Very much so. And finally, we have the shareware game Snakes. That again is looking very professional. PD and shareware had really stepped up in '93. And this game is Snake, but it's also Light Cycles. It's also 2-player, and it's also got an AI option. Happy days! And I think you can guess how this game plays. But to have something to talk about, I'll go over it anyway, as you have to collect the numbered icons to make your snake grow, and then you can use the tail to try and box in the other player to get them to hit something. All while they'll be trying to do the same to you, in theory. There seems to be a number of level layouts, as well as power-ups and downs for you to collect. And overall, it's a neat idea that's been presented very well. And moving on to our final magazine, we have Amiga Action, that gave us 2 discs and 4 demos, starting with F1 Challenge. And if this one doesn't ring a bell, that's because it got later renamed to F17 Challenge. Guessing there might have been some legal issues with that name, and being a game from Team 17, I guess that new name works quite well. This is a racing game in the Outrun Lotus style, with a behind-the-view car with that fake, fast-moving road going out in front of you. And it does look quite nice. And the ample times that I crash the vehicle gives us a chance to see the lovely drawn car from all angles. That is really well done. It also seems to have all the bells and whistles that you've come to expect from these sorts of races, with tunnels, sharp turns, difficult overtaking maneuvers, and hills and valleys. There's also a damage system that will slow you down and force you into the pit if it ends up getting too high, where you'll get some lovely little animations as it slowly repairs your vehicle. But at just 2 laps of this single track, it's not exactly the longest demo around, and outside of trying to get first, there really isn't much to bring you back. The second demo is Blastar, a game by Core Design. And this isn't just a vertical shooter, it's also horizontal. In fact, it's a multi-directional shooter. And thankfully there are some lovely backgrounds that makes it easy to tell which direction you're currently going, as you can turn around and just fly off, in a very similar control method to games like Asteroids. Now the goal seems to be just shoot things, with a few different weapons, which isn't exactly groundbreaking, but it is a lovely smooth moving shooter, even if your bullets seem to be a little bit more limited when you're rotating. It's a fine enough game, but even with that radar, it's not exactly the most exciting title around, as you just keep flying around in circles trying to find ships to shoot at. They might drop something that I'm not sure whether or not it does help or not, because it doesn't really indicate anything, but that just seems to be it. Now I've not put much time into the full game, so I can't really say how well this stacks up to the final release. But outside of some lovely looking graphics, I'm not sure the gameplay would have grabbed me enough for me to have gone out and bought the full title. The final game on this disc is Battle Cars 2, which is a follow-up to the quite decent PD game Battle Cars. And this, much like before, is a 3D driving game where you have to attack the other player, which can either be a person or the computer, even if they just seem to want to run away, and they win if the timer runs out and they haven't been destroyed. You attack them with either your main gun, or you have a few missiles, which you can get to lock on if you're far away enough and they'll try and home in. And overall it all runs quite nicely, and with multiple maps there are some variation, even if some of the smaller gaps can be a little bit of a pain to try and drive down. Now I've not got much to say about this game because it's pretty much like the first Battle Cars, so if you played that you should also enjoy this, as it's just that with a lot more of everything. Which brings us on to the final demo of the episode, and it's for the classic Syndicate, which is a game we've seen recently with that weird demo for the American Revolt, but this is a more simple one to get going. And ooh, isn't it fancy seeing the Amiga Action logo on the mission? Which makes it, I guess, a custom mission, or at least some custom text. I've not played Syndicate enough to memorise all of its missions. And it also tries to trick you into thinking that there's a real menu here that you can interact with, but really it's just a series of screens that you'll end up clicking through until the mission starts. And it will just dump you in with just 2 people and quite the number of targets to take down, which I guess is ideal for me because it's very simple. But it can be quite difficult due to that said number of agents, as well as your ammo feeling awfully limited, to the extent you'll have to try and collect the guns from the Fallen if you want to stand much of a chance, which I really didn't in any of my attempts, as they are quite relentless. Now I might not be better at this demo than when we played the other one, but at least this time I know why I'm not doing very well. But overall I had a lot of fun, and it's always great to see unique content for the demos. And there we have it. Let's see how the newest magazine fared as we rank them. And it turns out it's not last, as I feel we have to give that to Amiga Action. The demos were good, but they didn't really have much in the way of staying power, where the Amiga Computing, which comes second, did. All of the PD games were fun, and some of them were very good. Which is also the reason why the One For Amiga came first. Gritty was lovely, and Trex Warrior, well, it was a fine enough title for a free game. And there we have it, another month in the bag. And how did I do? Did you agree with me? Or do you think I got it wrong? Let me know down in the comments. Or even come onto the Discord and have a go at me there. Or, you know, join in the lovely chat. And if you have a spare moment, the old YouTube buttons are just there for you to mess around with. Use them however you feel fit. And until next time, I was the Goldfish. That was some very nicely done PD games, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, then I hope you enjoyed yourself, as much as at least I did in making this video. And if you did, then there should be 2 others that you can check out that's on the screen right now. Or otherwise, I hope to see you again soon.